Good evening, everybody. And firstly, thank you for taking the time out of your evening to join us here for Parker's Renters' Rights Bill update, where we'll be doing deep dives into everything to do with the Renters' Rights Bill and hopefully give you all the answers to what I can imagine are many questions of what's impending. And I think all of us here have seen over the past 6 to 12 months a huge uptake in concerns over what's coming in. And hopefully today we will be able to appease some of those issues. So I'm Simon West. I'm one of the directors here at Parker's, and I look after the offices from Spencerswood all the way through to Newbury, so mainly the West Berkshire division. And
I'm Mark. I'm the lettings director for Parker's Reading, Caversham, Twyford, Woodley, Early and Lower Early area as well. So the agenda for this evening, myself and Simon will be giving a brief market update, what's going on nationally and locally. We'll then be handing over to Eric, who will be doing a deep dive into the Renters' Rights Bill, giving you all the information you need to know, and that will be followed by some Q&As as well. So if you have any questions, please pop them in the Q&A section and we'll endeavour to answer those for you. So over to Simon, and he'll give us an update on what the market's doing.
Lovely, thank you, Mark. And so, yeah, it's been quite a busy first part of the year for us. And some of these stats came out from Rightmove earlier this year for quarter one. So to give you an idea across the whole of the UK, that rents have actually risen now by 0.6% in the first quarter of this year, bringing the national average at 13.49, which is up from around about 12.50 at the early part of last year. So a solid increase. And the first quarter of every year is always a little bit quieter across all marketplaces, naturally coming in after December and into the new year and everyone getting back into the swing of things. So hopefully over the next 6 months, the summer months, the market will pick up and rents will start to rise similarly to how we've seen them over the previous years. So the number of new properties coming to the market is up by 11%, which is really positive, to be fair. And last couple of years we've seen a lot of landlords exiting over concerns over the Renters' Rights Bill, and it's good to see that there are new landlords still coming to market, still finding it a busy marketplace out there and a good place to invest. So that's really positive. And currently we have 18% higher levels of stock than we did this time last year as well. So again, fueling those summer month spikes, it's going to be a really good year for us, hopefully. Meanwhile, there has been a slight dip, however, in prospective tenants. So again, quarter one, it is slightly natural to see lower levels, and coming into May, June, July, August, when school holidays are in and families start moving, that will certainly pick back up again. So yeah, a solid year so far, and Mark's going to go a little bit more into detail in how we've seen that perform over our areas, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, so locally, I think really it mirrors those stats that Simon's just been talking about. We've definitely seen that the volume of properties available is a little bit higher than we've seen in previous years. Certainly seen a little bit of a reduction in the volume of prospective tenants looking, but that said, locally there is still really, really solid demand. There are lots of people looking. I think if we move on to the next slide, you can see that price-wise, we're probably, I would say, sort of smack bang in the middle of Southeast and Southwest in terms of pricing, on average sort of probably 16.50 per calendar month. But yeah, really solid levels of interest, although it is a little bit lower than it has been, a little bit more available. So it's really crucial just to be competitive with the pricing at the moment. And if you're doing that, you are going to let, and you're still going to let at really good levels. So what we'll do now is we'll hand over to Eric, who will introduce himself and talk you through the Renters' Rights Bill.
Hi, so I'm Eric. I'm Managing Director of the brands Parker's, CJ Hole, Ellis & Co, and a couple of others that you won't probably know because they're nowhere near here. I make no apology for the fact this will probably be the most miserable 45 minutes of your life. So if you want to spend a couple of minutes getting in the queue for the Samaritans helpline, they tend to get very busy later during my presentation. Now, Unlike when we do this in person, it's a little bit harder because I can't ask questions. But let's start off with ask yourselves, do you know who this is? And the answer is Pandora and Pandora's box. And from school, you may remember that Pandora's box, when opened, contained all the evils of the world. And once it was opened, all that left was the hope. And that's what Parkers will do. They will give you the hope to navigate this bill. And I promise you, it will be fine. But you need to know the pitfalls. This is interesting. So Polly Neat is the head of shelter. She's just retired, I think. I've got to be careful what I say because she's a bit cross with me at the moment. I use the word disinformation or misinformation, which is true. They do understandably put a spin on things to benefit tenants. This isn't about tenants. This isn't about landlords. This is about both. So one thing I will ask you guys is don't rely on Google, because Google will not give you the right answer. It'll give you the most looked up answer. It'll give you the one with the best keywords, keyword density, keyword frequency, but it might not be right. That's why we're holding webinars such as this. Now, representation, what gives me the right to talk to you, lovely people? Well, I'm part of the Letting Industry Council, the Lettings Advisory Board. I also happen to be chair of the Property Redress Scheme, as well as I've done advisory work with the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, and Trading Standards, though I don't think they're talking to me at the moment. So the first thing that's going to happen, and you'll all be aware of this, is the abolition of Section 21. All tenancies, both new tenancies and existing tenancies, you will lose the right to serve notice using Section 21 from the date the bill is enacted or it becomes an act. Does it matter hugely? I promise you it doesn't. It's a myth. It doesn't. How do I know that? Because we've already been through this in Scotland, and it didn't make a lot of difference. Everyone in Scotland was nervous about, I think it was Section 33 being abolished. It didn't make any difference. In fact, you will have more grounds for possession than you have now. You won't be able to have a fixed term tenancy. Any tenancy you grant now, the fixed term element will expire immediately the bill is enacted, and all tenancies will become assured periodic tenancies. So if you bear in mind the wonderful phrase, statute overrides contract, then whatever contractual term is in there, irrespective of what it says, then the law will override it. Tenancies will be forever until you have a legitimate reason to bring it to an end, or the tenant serves you notice. And if you do anything wrong, like try to grant a fixed term tenancy, you'll get fined. And fines start at up to £7,000, and for repeated offenders go up to £40,000, plus a potential rent repayment order of up to 2 years' rent. So if you manage a property yourself, good luck. But I really want you to think about researching this thoroughly. It's not just what's in the bill, it's what isn't, and we'll talk about that. So just to reiterate, there is no prospect of any fixed term tenancy, even if the tenant asks for one. You can't do it. One of the benefits, I don't know how many of you, and I can't ask you, how many people have actually been to court with Section 21? Well, it's quite a lot. And if a tenant doesn't comply with the 2 months notice under Section 21, you have to fill out an accelerated possession form, which is form N5B. And specifically on page 20, it gives a list of everything that the lovely judge will want to see. If any one of these elements is missing, you won't get possession. And there's a lot that you have to provide for each year of the tenancy. With Section 8, you don't have to provide any such thing. Okay, it's easy. All you have to provide is proof that the deposit was protected. So in some ways, there's going to be a lot less bureaucracy and a lot less possessions being thrown out by judges. See, it's not all bad. There are restrictions. So anything that says you have to have an AST, you don't have to do it because there won't be any. Mortgagees can't specify ASTs. Any such requirement will be invalid. Any contract or obligation that the property must be handed back with vacant possession will be invalid. So anyone who's using a rent-to-rent agent or guaranteed rent agent who then sublets it, be careful, because they don't own the property, so how will they be able to get it back? So have a real think about that. In fact, you shouldn't use those sort of agents. You should, what was it you said, only use Parkers, wasn't it?
Yeah. Exactly that.
So rent payments, and this is really important, you will not be able to take more than 1 month's rent in advance. Full stop. There is no more advance rent, and we'll talk about student tenancies in a bit. You can take a shorter period, but 1 month is the maximum. The Renters' Rights Bill is much tougher than the Renters' Reform Bill, because Michael Gove gave a bit of ground that Angela Rayner won't. Where a student is looking to move in, he can no longer pay a year up front or a term up front. He can't pay money in line with his loan. It is 1 month. And what you must be aware, and I'm going to tell you this, you won't like it, and it is true. You cannot take 1 month in advance until such time as the tenancy agreement has been executed. Okay, signed and dated. Now, why is this important? Well, if the tenant then says, actually, I'm a bit short at the moment, I'm not going to give you a month up front, you can't stop them from moving in. Under the Protection from Eviction Act 1977, they have a right to move in. Parkers, TPFG, we can protect you against all these things. We have plans in place. We've got contractual terms that will protect you, but we're also going to have a fantastic rent and legal protection policy. All you need to do is speak to your local office and they can explain how we can help at a very, very modest cost.
House has moved up.
Oh, where's it gone?
There it is.
Ah. Tenant notice. There's a common myth that in fixed term tenancies, a tenant must give you 2 months notice. They don't. It expires with the natural effluxion of time. I love that phrase, but I won't be able to say it much longer, so I'm milking it. Common law, and this is really important, suggests that if one tenant serves notice, it ends the tenancy for all of them. Okay, which is quite important. Notice can only expire at the end of a rental period. So this thing about they can move in and move out 2 months later isn't true. It'll be 3 months before they can move out, because if they serve notice on day one, it won't take effect till the first day of the next rental period, and they must give 2 months. The means of notice can't be specified. It can be email, it can be written, it can be a text message, it could be anything, but it has to be in some form of written format. But you can specify where the notice is served, i.e. to the agent or the landlord. Now, I love this bit. Notice by one tenant is binding on all. So if you've got 3 or 4 tenants and you want them out, how about looking at which one looks the poorest, bunging them £1,000 and saying, can you go? Because then if they serve notice, you can end the tenancy without having to go down any other route. So notices going forwards, you can only use Section 8 grounds, which have been extended in fairness. Most notice periods, particularly for no fault grounds, are now 4 months. And that is going to be a bit of a problem, as we will see shortly. You have to give 4 weeks notice rather than 2 for rent arrears. ASB hasn't changed. You can get very good quick possession, but they can't grant possession earlier than 14 days from the date of notice. Now, rent arrears, as we said, the period is doubling to 4 weeks. The grounds 10 and 11 are the same, but they're discretionary grounds. So ground 10 is where a tenant is in arrears at the time of service, and ground 11 is that they were regularly in arrears. Ground 8 is a mandatory mandatory ground. Unfortunately, they now need to be, once the Act comes in, 3 months in arrears, not 2. We did have a lovely clause in the previous version of the bill, which was if a tenant was 2 months in arrears 3 times in a 3-year period, you could ask them to leave. You can't now. So we know for a fact from anecdotal evidence, they will need to be 4 months in arrears before you can serve or start court proceedings. And we know that in some areas, it will take you up to a year to get a possession order. We can protect you against that. Our rental legal protection policy will protect you for up to 15 months of rent arrears. Okay, and again, it is very modest. But if anyone who doesn't have it is going to find a risk. Now, this is quite important. The first 2 grounds don't apply if you own a property in a limited company vehicle. This only because obviously a company can't have a relative. So the new ground 1 is letting to a close family member. And the government have very kindly listed what close family members are, seriously. And they've even mentioned something to do with Harry Potter, that half-bloods count as close family members. I'm not joking. The only thing is, once you've served ground 1, you can't relet the property to anyone else for a period of 12 months. Likewise, under ground 1A, where you want to sell a property, guess what? You say you want to sell, you serve the tenant 4 months notice under ground 1A, you cannot relet that property for 12 months following the expiry of the notice. So here's the trick. Don't serve notice. Just bung them a couple of grand and ask them to leave. Because if no notice has been served, guess what? It can't expire. So just remember that. Ground 1A is a very powerful way of getting possession. It's always good to talk to a tenant and see whether or not you can come to a financial arrangement with them. Most tenants don't want to move. But if they say, do you know what? We've seen somewhere we could move to. If they serve you notice, Bob's your uncle, problem solved. Again, if you breach any of the procedures, it's a £7,000 fine, usual things. So just remember the phrase that the restricted period starts from expiry of notice. If you don't serve notice, it can't expire. But that is the correct way of doing it. Rent increases going forward. At the moment, you should never serve a Section 13 notice unless it's a statutory periodic tenancy. That's going to change. And Parkers can do all this for you. You don't have to be concerned about it. We can serve the notice for you. There are a few things you should be aware of. There is no other way you can increase notice. And even if you come to an agreement with your tenant, it would be very unwise to do so. And what you should do is issue Section 13 notice, effectively at full market rent. And when they phone you up and say, what? You can agree a figure. If, however, you agree a figure first and it's lower than full market rent, and you serve the Section 13 notice, they can still appeal it. It is free for a tenant to appeal. But in reality, they don't like filling out loads of forms, so it isn't that difficult. There is no permissible agreement until after the notice is served. As it stands now, the first tier tribunal have the ability to increase the rent above the figure on the Section 13. Going forward, they won't. You'll have to give 2 months' notice to the tenant about the rent increase. But more relevant is the date of the increase of rent will be effective from the hearing date, not from the date of the notice. And the first tier tribunal can add 2 months to that if they feel sorry for the tenant. This is not rent control, all right? This is rent suppression. In fact, this famous Swedish economist said the best way to destroy a city, other than bombing, is rent controls. So this is how it is going to be. But as I say, the Parkers team will be able to assist you in all this. We're going to have to provide written terms. We don't know quite what they're going to be yet, but it's going to be a bit like Wales, I would think. And government provided in Wales a specimen written terms document, which they told us the day before launch that we couldn't use. Don't ask. It was a very late night for me. The written terms must be served before a tenancy starts or within a month of an existing tenancy from enactment. I would imagine these written terms effectively explain the changes in the tenancy agreement to the new assured tenancy. You won't have to replace every tenancy immediately, but you will at renewal. And again, we can do this all for you. And further, in addition to penalties, there's rent repayment orders if you don't provide this documentation. Now, rent bidding. God, what do I say about rent bidding? It's an utterly ridiculous idea because you will not be able to take 1 penny above the rent that you are seeking or advertise a property at. You just can't. Okay? You cannot accept any higher offer. So imagine we, by law, have to put forward offers, don't we?
Yep.
So imagine you've got a property on the market for £1,000 and some tenant says, oh, I really want this because mum lives next door. I'll offer you 1,100. We're obliged to say, hey, you've got good news and bad news here. Look at what you could have won, but you can't take the 1,100. So what's going to happen? Rents are going to go up, aren't they? Asking rents are going to go up. So this has been very poorly thought out, in my humble opinion. Again, same financial penalties. And I will say this, and I'm not political. The people responsible for rent bidding are tenants, not agents. Yeah. Simple as that. We don't want to do it. We don't want to disappoint people. We just want to get the best price for our landlords. We don't want them to have a Dutch auction. It's very unprofessional, and we don't like doing it. Pets in lets. This is a common problem that many landlords raise with me. You don't have to have a pet. But when the Renters' Rights Bill was first published, the front page of the Daily Mail said, landlords forced to have pets. Well, that's rubbish. You're not forced to have pets. You're forced to consider a pet. There is nothing wrong with advertising a property as unsuitable for pets. You know, if you've got a 4th floor studio flat and the tenant says, hey, I've got a couple of Rottweilers, would that be all right? No. Simple as that. You just have to consider it and be seen to consider it. But please bear this in mind. It's another one of my top tips. If a tenant says, can I have a dog? And you say no, and the tenant says, oh, okay, then they'll probably get one anyway, or they'll probably move one in anyway. So it's better to have a chat with the tenant and say, look, you can have a dog, but you'll have to take out pet damage insurance. All right? You pay for the pet damage insurance and then recharge the tenant. Otherwise, they'll pay for it and cancel it. We've already seen this happen in the past. So you don't have to have pets. If you've got a leasehold property and the superior lease says no pets, that's perfectly justifiable reason to say no. All right? Likewise, allergies. It's perfectly reasonable to tell someone, I'm really sorry, but I'm seriously allergic. I have an allergy to cats. And my evil ex-wife, Voldemort, used to have a cat. And I'm sure she put it on my pillow so I'd end up with anaphylactic shock. Anyway, I've got rid of it and the cat. So you can get tenants to pay for the insurance. You can charge a pet rent. It's not as bad as it seems. I had a landlord only on Wednesday who said to me, this woman had a dog and it cost me 10,000 quid in damages. If you'd had pet damage insurance, it wouldn't have cost you a brass farthing. We can do this for you. You will all have to join a landlord redress scheme. Who knew? We're all members of the Ombudsman scheme, aren't we?
Yep.
Or the property redress scheme, one of the two. We're always members. But now a tenant can complain to a landlord's redress scheme. And just to be clear, if you own a property in your name, your partner's got one in their name, one's in joint names and one's in a company name, you'll have to register 4 times. Now, we don't know whether we will be able to register on your behalf at this stage, but it looks unlikely, but if we can, we will. There will only be one scheme, even though we said there may be more than one. It could happen in the future. Again, the same penalties, and the redress scheme will have powers to expel you as a landlord, which means you can't rent. And coupled with the property, the private rented sector database, we know roughly what it's going to look like because I've seen a preview. It's not very good, but it'll evolve in time. So you'll have to put on there your EICR, your gas safety record, and all the legal requirements, your Legionella's risk assessment, all the things that you would normally provide through the agent. Now, we can do this for you because we hold all this data. There will be fees for operation, not from us. Again, the same civil penalties and rent repayment orders. And until you've got your unique property reference number, there'll be a ban on marketing. And believe me, trading standards will be checking you because it's like shooting fish in a barrel for them, isn't it? They are considering making a public register of naughty landlords. I don't know how that sits with general data protection regulations, but that's their idea. We can charge to register you, whether we do or not. Well, it depends how nice you are to us. If you're a let-only landlord, tough. Now, I'm just going to go through a couple more slides. I promise you there's not a lot more to do. But the HHSRS, the safety rating system, you don't need this done by a professional with big fees. You can teach yourself how to do this. It's on the government website. Look it up. It just helps you identify different categories, different hazards, and you will be expected to do this. Or we can undertake the task. AWAB's law, which I'm a big supporter of, that poor little boy, I think he was about 5, who died because of damp and mold. I am going to say this, I bet most of your properties are fine. This was social housing, and it really makes me cross. The government, who effectively are the providers of social housing, have the audacity to criticise responsible landlords. And I will tell you that under the new regulations, if someone complains about damp and mold, you will be required to ask for a written report, commission a written report within 7 days. Then you'll have 14 days to commence works. Right, that's not long. Damp is a very hard thing to identify. I once rented a flat in Lock's Wharf on the Isle of Dogs. Beautiful flat, brand new. A lady moved in and within a week phoned me up and said, I've got damp and mold everywhere. So I went round to the property with my Dettol mold and mildew remover, gave it a big squirt and it all went away. A week later, she phoned me, it was back. I couldn't understand it. So I went and got a dehumidifier and put it in the flats. And within a day, this dehumidifier had pretty much filled up. So I asked for her permission to go round to the flat to empty it. She said, that's fine. When I got there, I opened the second bedroom. And there were 3 clothes horses covered in wet clothes. And that was the cause of the damp. And I said to her, why didn't you open the bloody window? She said, I was worried about burglars. You're on the 4th floor. Anyway, that it's not meant to sound funny, it's true. And just be aware of that. You need to educate your tenants as well. Trading standards in Reading, I know very well. They're a nice bunch. From the enactment of the Renters' Rights Bill, trading standards from anywhere in the country have the right to investigate a complaint. And that is quite serious. Because at the moment, if someone owns a property like Newham Council will deal with it. But if they find that landlord owns properties in Reading, they will come here. Okay? They can seek information from any person involved, landlord, tenant, agent. They can enter the agency without a warrant. They can seize computers and documents, and they can visit the property to inspect it. It won't affect us. We've had 42 trading standards inspections across the group, and we've always come away with a clean bill of health. So when is it going to start? The House of Lords have pretty much finished their deliberations at the committee stage. We don't know when it will start. We believe, and I spoke to MHCLG friend yesterday, they think we will probably get royal assent before the summer recess, which is 22nd of June, I think, or July. I know it begins with a J, which isn't very helpful, but it's not January. They'll then go into their summer recess. The earliest the bill is likely to come in is October, but with all that's going on in the world and with the legislation going through, it might trip over to the end of the year or January. So we still don't know, but we are keeping an eye on it. When the bill comes in, all fixed-term tenancies will end immediately, as I said. You'll no longer be able to serve Section 21 notices, but the Section 21 notices served before enactment will remain valid for up to 6 months. I hope that makes sense to you. If not, pop a question in the questions. And this is absolutely true. In the bill, it gives an absolutely awesome, forensically accurate timescale, which says everything else will be implemented when ready. You couldn't make it up, could you? I did ask them about the regulation of property agents, known as ROPA. I said to a minister who I won't mention, what's happening with ROPA? And he said, what's ROPA? And this is what we're dealing with. Don't believe everything you read in the press. The great landlord sell-off is a myth, which independently, the guys here have verified. I can tell you now, 11% of properties on the market that were previously rented, 11%. But of those, 40% of that 11% go back to reletting. And of the rest of them, most of them, we've been selling to investors. The other thing I'll say to you is, I've got a friend who's owns quite a few properties. He came into some money where I live. Lovely man he is. But he's now become a lettings expert, which was strange because he used to be a fireman. And he's become the Martin Lewis of rentals. Well, Eric, I'm only getting a 3% yield or 3.5% yield, or my yield's dropped. Nigel, how much did you buy that property for? 250,000. What's it worth? 500,000. Why are you moaning? Yeah. So have a real close look at values, because that's as much part of your investment as the yield. And those of you who self-manage, look, I'm not here to scare you. I'm here to tell you the truth. It could prove very expensive. I always think my house insurance is expensive, and I've paid it every year for 20 years. 2 years ago, I got burgled. I was bloody glad I had it. So please enter questions or thoughts in the chat box located on the top right. Have I read that correctly? I'm being passed notes. And we're here to help. Any other questions you can send through at any time, and it'll be passed on to the team, and they will copy me in if necessary.
It looks like we've got a couple of questions here, Eric. So the first one is from Simon. Are rent not this Simon? Are rent increases still capped at RPI?
They never have been capped at any level. Okay, so it's unfortunately a myth. Even in a tenancy agreement where it says RPI, you don't have to grant a renewal at the moment. So what you do is you just say, leave the property if you don't want to pay the rent. So they're not capped at RPI. There has been talk about it, but as it stands, it's capped at the current market rent.
Brilliant. We've got another one here from Steve.
Hi, Steve.
Are there any tenancies to which the law will not apply?
Yes, any tenancies that are outside the 1988 Housing Act, such as company lets.
Another one here from Greg. How will rent reviews operate?
Well, you will send out a Section 13 notice, which you can only do after 12 months. You will put the rent you require on there. The tenant will have a seizure, phone you up and say, oh, can I pay you a bit less? If you agree, that's fine. And as soon as they've paid that rent, problem solved. If they say, well, I'm going to appeal it, then they can appeal free of charge to the first tier tribunal, and you will have to evidence your case. But again, Parkers can help you with that.
Yeah, I think crucially from our point of view, we're going to be looking at putting together lots of comparable evidence.
Exactly.
So that when we're going to a tenant, if they do dispute it and want to go to a tribunal, we've got everything we need to back that up. We've got one here from Sandra. What if the landlord would like to sell the property?
Well, you can rely upon ground 1A of Section 8, ground 1A, as long as you give the tenants 4 months' notice. And for the avoidance of doubt, and I didn't cover this off particularly well, so I'll do it now, the tenant is entitled to 12 months residency in the property. However, number one, you can serve notice at 8 months, because 8 plus 4 obviously equals 12. That's fine. And if they've already been in there for, say, 6 months, then you've only got to wait another 6 months, or rather 2 months, before you serve the 4 months notice. So you can get possession back quite easily using ground 1A.
Brilliant. This is probably a good one for myself and Simon. I'll let you take the lead, Simon.
Yep.
So Sammy Chan, is it still worth buy to let?
Yeah, great question, and quite a commonly asked one, to be honest. So I think, like Eric said, I think when you're looking at an investment, it's not just yields and things like that you have to look at, but property has always been a solid investment model, whether it be from rental income or from capital appreciation. I think that the crux to it all is having the right person looking after the tenancy and that whole process for you. So as we're going through the slides, obviously if you're a self-managed landlord, then all of this would fall onto your plate. Once the tenants have moved in, you would have to ensure that all of this is being kept up to date with and that you're in check. Whereas if you've got it managed by someone like Parker's, all of this is handled by us. So no concerns or worries from you, from your side even, sorry. So 100%, I think, like Eric said earlier, with the rent caps, we're expected to see specifically marketed or market rents increase quite dramatically once this comes in. And I think that in turn will push up the actual achieved rents quite rapidly as well. So yields will increase, and back to that capital appreciation, it will go up as well. So 100% is still worth it.
Yeah, I think you've covered that all off there, Simon. So Rod has asked, if looking to let before the bill is in force, will they be initially on fixed term, then transfer?
Yes. There's no reason, because we don't know when the bill is going to come in. So you can do a 12-month, 2-year fixed term tenancy now. It'll just cease to exist when the bill is enacted. Nothing changes for now.
How did you find tenancy lengths change in Scotland when this came in?
They increased. They actually went up. And landlords are pretty happy in Scotland. And ironically, even though Scotland did introduce rent caps, rent increases in Scotland were higher in England. And it's a very complicated reason as to why. But it's worked fine up there. We haven't had any problems.
Good.
Apologies if I pronounce this wrong. Evelyn has asked, hi everyone. If I am renting my only residential home and I have a residential mortgage, what is going to happen if the tenant goes into arrears and I cannot pay the mortgage payments?
Well, you get screwed, is the honest answer. That's why you should take out our rent and legal protection, which not only covers the arrears for 15 months at a very, very favourable market rate, but it will also cover all your legal fees, and they will serve the Section 8 notice, and they will handle everything for you. So you never need worry about your mortgage.
I think it's going to be crucial for landlords moving
100%.
forwards. It's something we've offered for many years, and I think it's something that we're already starting to see a dramatic uptake in.
I'm going to be transparent on this. So we've done a deal with an insurer who are huge, and we're huge. We manage 152,000 properties, and we've got the best rate on the market. And I can tell you now that some competing policies are going up already, going up and doubling. We've got a rate fixed for 2 years.
Sean has asked, how much can a landlord legally raise the rent each year?
It's a great question. The answer is to the market rent at the moment. Unless Angela Rayner changes the way the bill is drafted, and I can't see anything changing in it, it'll be to the market rent. So long as you can demonstrate it's a fair market rent, that will be probably the maximum you can increase it to.
I've got an interesting one here from Dave. What if my tenant has a really smelly cat? I'm not sure I'll answer that one.
Well, clothes pegs. If your tenant has a smelly cat, there isn't a lot you can do apart from maybe get some deodorant.
Insurance in
Air
place.
freshener.
I mean, look, it's a good question. I'll be honest with you. I know we're laughing at the expense of Dave's smelly cat, but look, what do? You'll never get possession of a property just because the cat smells. All right, it's as simple as that. So I'm afraid you'll have to put up with it. Make sure you've got pet damage insurance so you can sanitize the property afterwards or shoot it. I didn't say that.
I've got one here from Valerie. Where are the hot areas to buy locally? That's probably one for me and you, Simon.
Yeah. So I think we've seen kind of different pockets vary, really. I think if you're looking at centralised Reading, I think 2-bedroom apartments have always been a popular buy. However, there is a lot of them available on the rental market. So you could potentially pick them up a little bit cheaper, but you would be competing against many other properties of similar calibre. So you have to be slightly more aggressive with renting. I think it really kind of depends on the kind of tenants that you want to buy. If you're looking for families and that longer term lets, then you would traditionally go further outside of town centres. I think if you're looking for more of the single professional contractors that have got good contracts in Reading, going into London and places like that, then you would go for your traditional town centre apartment. So really kind of varies on areas. Yields vary and kind of interest varies from town to town, really. And I think it would be good, dependent on what your strategy is and what you're looking for from the investment. It would be worth setting up a call with either myself or Mark, and we'll figure out exactly what's right for you, and then kind of go further into there once we figure that out, really.
I think we're quite lucky locally. Most areas, in the areas that we operate in,
Completely agree,
are very much in demand, whether it be a very centralised location or a bit further afield. You know, where we operate is very busy. There's always really good levels of demand, and we get really good levels of rent. So, to pin it down to a specific area is tough.
Really hard. Yeah,
comes down
all
to
dependent
your
on
budget
criteria.
and all sorts of stuff. But give us a call if you want to discuss in more detail. We'll happily talk you through it.
Exactly that.
Rebecca's asked, if rental prices are likely to increase after the bill is passed, will landlords be able to increase rental prices if the tenancy is within 12 months?
No, 12 months is always a difficult term. You can only increase rents once in a 12-month period. And then the tribunal, if appealed, will determine the next date upon which you can do it. But if rents go up, that's just how it is. You can't keep increasing rents because rents keep going up. You'll get one chance to issue the notice under Section 13. Don't forget, this will start from the date the tenancy originally commenced.
Another good one from Sean. If my tenants are causing disruption to the neighbours, can I evict them?
Yes, that falls under antisocial behaviour, which you'll need to evidence to a court. You'll have to prove they've been antisocial, which probably means keeping a diary, getting witness statements from neighbours. But yes, you still can. Antisocial behaviour is very much a thing still. And particularly, if I may say so, in the realms of domestic violence, because the courts take a very dim view of that. So yes, you'll be protected.
Nikki's asked, and this is a very good point, Nikki, is there an option to rewatch this for webinar if we've missed the start? Yes, absolutely. We have recorded it and we'll be sending it out to everyone via email. You'll also be sent through a survivor's guide to the renters' rights bill as well, which might be useful if you just want to recap on anything. So yeah, absolutely. You will be able to watch it in your own time. Message from Narinda. What if the tenants do not put heating due to cost of energy costs and giving rise to damp and mold? Even if the landlords try to educate, what rights do the landlords have in the new bill?
Well, under AWAB's law, you'll be required to get a written report on the cause. And if the cause is the tenant and they don't pay attention, I would actually flag it with the local housing authority so that you've got a due diligence paper trail.
Fantastic. I think that is all of the questions that we've received. Obviously, if anybody wants
good questions.
Really good questions. If anyone has got any last questions to ask, feel free to fire them over now. We have got a QR code on the screen. If you would like to organise to have a chat in more detail with myself and Simon, then you can book in a consultation, and we'll be in touch to discuss any further questions you may have. It doesn't look like there's any more questions coming in. So once again, thank you for your time this evening. I hope it's been useful and informative. I'm sure it has been. Thank you to Eric for your expertise. Been a real
You're welcome.
benefit.
Feel free to pass this on to anyone as well who has questions that may not have been on the webinar. Friends, family, anyone that you can think of, by all means, pass them our details. And like Eric said, if they haven't got properties in our areas, we cover all across the country. So I'm sure we'd have an office somewhere within the UK that would be able to assist.
Definitely.
So feel free, share, get people in contact by all means.
And talk to them about rent and legal protection before it's too late.
Absolutely. Brilliant.
Good. Lovely.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much.
See you soon.